It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this evening's event. I'd like to thank Mesh, our venue partner, for hosting us, our community partner, Grunder, all of our wonderful volunteers, and each and every one of you for choosing to spend your evening with us and joining us here. If you're not familiar with Business for Peace, we're an international foundation that believes that every business leader should have it as the core of their purpose to improve society. We give out the annual Oslo Business for Peace Award to exceptional business leaders who are doing just that and leading by example. We host an award ceremony at Oslo City Hall every May and a summit around that. And we are delighted to be launching this Afterwork series to continue those conversations in a new forum with you. So tonight, we're talking about the future of cities. 3.5 billion people live in cities. With technological advancements, climate change, economic changes, cities are changing too. People are increasingly moving to urban centers, and we have to adapt the way we're living. And so to shed some light on what this future might look like, we've gathered three very lovely and intelligent local experts to share their perspective. So please join me in welcoming Silje, who is the head of sustainability and technology at Noor Shipping and the former head of Smart City Oslo. Johan is the Chief Technology Officer at Urban Sharing. And Frode is the Head of Strategy at Ruter. If you'd like to share some thoughts online while they're talking, you can use the hashtag #FutureOfCities. So I'll hand it over to you. Who is starting?
Thank you. Honored to be here. Business for Peace is like, if you're invited for that kind of event, you cannot say no. And there's some kind of expectations to live up to. Frode Hvattum is my name. I am a strategist and very dedicated and passionate about sustainability. And that's why I was honored to have the job of responsible for strategy, but also sustainability at Ruter. Who knows Ruter? Okay, very good. So we are responsible for operating the public transportation with the boats and buses and trams and metros in Oslo. But we're more excited to also be responsible for developing the future of public transportation, or hopefully also the future of mobility, which I think I'm here to talk about. So we think that the future of let's say city and the future of mobility will be very exciting and quite different than what it is today. And you've been talking a bit about the drivers for why that is so. And we've been spending a lot of time understanding four things that's happening. One is the urbanization, that you get more people here, you get more elderly, which you have to adapt to. The second, which is the big buzzword, is digitalization, which we are working a lot on. And for us, it's about a lot of technology stuff coming together that's already happening. It's about all the open data, the big data that's out there, that's just getting bigger and more. It's about that you have devices and things that makes these data talk to each other. So instead of just being there, it will be able to transfer from one device to another, to your phone, to a business, etc. So it's happening, it's flowing around. And the third thing is about artificial intelligence. So it's also been there for some times, but it's getting smarter. So instead of having people who have to program their way to the use of technology, the development is happening a lot faster, because machine is learning based on data. So when these three things are coming together, that's what we experiencing happening with digitalization. And that's also when we see that the big money flow of investments are happening in technology that will be high effect on mobility, that being self-driving cars, that being mobility apps, that being smart devices and other kind. So technology is something we've been spending a lot of time to understand, especially the commercial investments happening on technology and how that will be threats and opportunities for us. The third thing is happening is the individualization, what we call it. And that's very interesting for us as a public transportation company to work on. Because what we do is basically take a lot of people from one place to another. And then suddenly you hear that a big trend is like customers, you, us, expect to have individual solutions. We don't go on NRK to watch TV at 7 o'clock. We go to Netflix and get whatever we want when we want it. You know, you have Facebook, who's ultimately adapted to my needs. The same is with if you book a hotel or whatever. So you have a lot of industries that is adjusted so that you will get your needs solved. And again, if you have a bus that runs every day at 4:05 from that station to that station, and you see development with Uber, with Tesla cars, etc., you see that you have an issue. We're not going to be delivering that, let's say, competitive offer if we don't manage to make it more individualized. And our thinking is, if we don't manage to make our buses and boats and whatever we provide more individualized, you will take the other option. You'll take that Tesla, that self-driving. It's good for each individual, but it will create a city and a society that I don't think we want as a total. So we have to make our solutions more attractive to all of us. And then the fourth driver is sustainability. And I think that's why we're here, right? We have some really serious issues in the world that we have to solve, mainly, mostly in terms of climate change, but also in societal values, equality, economic growth, etc. And that's the four, let's say, drivers that we've been trying to understand. And if we see, based on all that, we see a different future in 10 years than now. And we see that it might be really, really good, and it might be not that good. And in terms of that picture we want to see, the future we want to have, to my perspective, is that transportation mobility is cheaper and it works, it flows. It's not longer a very issue in your life. So if you wake up in the morning, let's say, and you try to imagine this without a car. You wake up in the morning, you will know basically when the bus is running, you get some message, and the bus, whatever you need to take, is out there, and it gets you from where you want to go to where you want to, from where you are to where you want to go. If there is some issues in the trams, you'll get that notice, like there's an issue, but you'll have an alternative. You don't be bothered to search for thousands of solutions, which makes you take the car the other day. And in evening time, when those of you who have kids are driving around with the kids to sports, that can be solved by more efficiently driving together. So there's many things that can be solved a lot better with transportation than it is today. Today we have a car that costs about 100,000 kroners a year, that stands still about 95% of the time, that 1.5% uses into the city. And it's still the best alternative. That's what we do. And it's really stupid. So we can do a lot better with shared and attractive solutions. But that means that we have to use technology integration, smart, customized solutions combined with the shared solutions to make that happen. So that's the future we do want. We don't want a solution where we all Norwegians buy a Tesla, which is driverless in 6-7 years. And we love that Tesla. It works taking that to the cabin, maybe. But when you get that solution in a city where you take that Tesla to work and the Tesla drives back home, it will have not that optimized impact, because it will mean it'll be traffic jams. It'll require a lot of space, and the space could be used for other things, like children playground, and for us to actually have a happy life and go to bars. So we, you know, and the more attractive those individual solutions that we can have are, the more important is it that we have to look at it and use it into kind of a system and integrated way. So we leverage the car more than 5%. So we can share journeys when that makes sense and use a separate car when it actually is necessary. So that's why we are working both on having more public transportation. So we have actually now more public transportation travels, 370 million a year, more than 1 million travels every day, than private car journeys, which is really a good thing to celebrate. But we also think we have to expand that by looking at ways to partner up with other things, like can we combine that with the city bike? Can we combine that in the future with a sharing solution for vehicles? Should we combine it with taxi solutions? And could we put some technology layers on top of it so it's less difficult for me to handle my traveling? More easy. You know, we got more options to travel where I want to go, when I want to go. And that's when the app and the platform and the data and the leverage of data is really important. So I want to end up with just giving 2 examples on hopefully innovative things that we're working on to be able to capture that possibility. One is a pilot that we have in Stabekk, which we saw that we have a lot of small buses that runs for school kids. And we have Stabekk coming to us saying that, you know, we have some football training up there, and there's 124 cars going, parents driving the kids up to football training. And we think there might be a smarter way to do this. And there's a bit too expensive to just buy commercial things. Well, we have a sustainability strategy. We have integrated 8 sustainability goals. So we're looking at a whole broad sector of things that could inspire us to do something because it creates societal value. So we said we want to test that. So we take 10 buses, and those 10 replaced 124 cars going to where we want to go to the training. So what's the result of that test? Well, first of all, of course, you reduce environmental damage, right? So because it's 10 buses, soon to be electric, instead of 124 cars. Secondly, we saw that, well, think about that from an economic growth perspective. So you get all those 124 parents who don't have to drive, who can spend their time on work, on doing other things, which is good for productivity. What about equality and a good life? One of the most motivating things of that test was when we interviewed somebody to understand, was it a successful project for you as a mom? She cried, and she said, yes, because my son was able to go to football training. Because the husband of that family was damaged, was paralyzed. They didn't have enough capacity to drive the kid to football. Well, in the luxury life of us in Norway right now, one of the worst things is not the kids not being able to do what all the other kids are, football training. So these all things were things that actually we could create of societal value for many people by having that kind of a solution. And you then integrate and optimize the leverage of vehicles, etc. The other examples I want to have is that I have in my pocket a phone. And on that phone, a new app that we're testing, a new Ruter app, you know, the black Ruter app and the red Ruter app. Well, this is a new kind of app that hopefully you will get someday, soon I hope, which first of all are personalized. So you can register who you are, and we get allowance from you to use your data. And we can give you information that, you know, your bus normally leaves in 10 minutes, it's delayed. And I know you have maybe you should take the bicycle because it's really traffic jam today. I don't know. There's a lot of things we can do which we don't do. So we're trying to personalize, be a personal assistant to you in mobility. The second element of that app is that it takes data from your Helse app and gets that into the Ruter app. And then we want to try to hopefully reward you from walking and bicycling. So I just saw that I've earned enough points of 3 weeks to convert those points of walking and bicycling to a month of public transportation ticket. So by doing that, I think I'm putting up an expectation of a product that might never appear. Now, I have to appear now. Self-fulfilling prophecies. No, but the thing is, what we're doing is we're taking kind of a platform approach, right? We want to be the attractive platform that you use, the app that you want to use for mobility. And then we're integrating walking and bicycling together with public transportation. The win-win is that you get better health because we are people who likes to play. You will walk and bicycle more to do that. And then people can say, well, you're spending, and then we make it more attractive because people will use our app and more public transportation because you use our app instead of Uber or whatever. And the third thing is actually, if you don't know that, public transportation is subsidized. Because every time you take the tram, you'll cost society money. Because the half of our income is from your ticket, the rest is from public money, meaning our tax money. So we actually are loading the capacity needs for public transportation by having people to walk and bicycle more. It's really a win-win-win. So we're really engaged to try to go from just public transportation to public transportation, cycling, walking, and shared solution in a way that creates a good society. And we're steering that based on 8 sustainability development goals. I think that was way beyond 7 minutes. I'm sorry, but thank you.
Well, I think I'm gonna hop in here if that's all right with you, Johan. I'm guessing that we're all in the mobility scheme here, and thank you for your talk, Frode. I've been working in the intersection between technology and the public sector for quite a few years. I used to work within technology transfer, and I started out working with the topic of smart cities after that. And I have to say, in the topic of mobility, the smart cities discussion and the future cities discussion has for the past few years been a lot about data, a lot about platforms, a lot about sharing solutions, and a lot about how we utilize data. And I guess you are kind of on 2 different fields here when it comes to individualized use of that data in order to create the best transport solutions and the most sustainable solutions. I, on the other hand, I'm on a more high-level area right now. I work in the shipping industry. And I moved from working with smart cities and the whole urbanization of areas into the maritime industry because what we do on sea has an enormous impact for the lives that we live on land. And does any one of you here know how much of the world's transport is actually transported by sea? How much of the world's goods? Do you know?
No.
Well, guess. 30. Okay, no, it's actually much more than that. Rough estimates say that 90% of the significant goods of the world are transported by sea. And yeah, I'm not going to vouch for that number, but yeah, rough estimate of the biggest and most important goods that we actually transport go by our sea lines. And at this point in time, a lot of people are talking about the sustainability goals, they're talking about pledges, they're talking about creating sustainable solutions, signing the UN Global Compact and whatnot. Working in the maritime industry, like I now do, is quite curious in this way, because my company just signed the UN Global Compact. And what does that mean? What does that mean for us, and what does it mean for the industry, and what does it mean for the future of the city of Oslo? I'm going to explain a little bit more to you about that. North Shipping, that I work for now, is one of the world's leading maritime industry conferences and expo. That means, in fact, that every second year we are attracting a rough estimate between maybe 30 to 35,000 people to Oslo and to Lillestrøm. And for what? Well, for one thing, it is to attend the expo and to have the experience of discussing with one another, to get information, to discuss and debate and create thought leadership on different topics. At the same time as we realize that this is a really great and important arena for so many players in our industries, it's also taking a huge impact on our environment, because most of our visitors, they come to Oslo and they come to Norway from global destinations by airplane. So you can only imagine the carbon emission that's involved here. It's really quite challenging for us, because I'm the first head of sustainability and technology of an industry player who's taken out to serve an industry that's now facing one of its biggest challenges ever. It's a lot to take in. We have, for that reason, said that we're going to focus in the time to come on changing our way of operating from only talking about shipping and moving over to the ocean industries realm. And one of the most important topics that we're going to bring up during Nordshipping 2019 is the blue economy. And the reason why we're speaking about the blue economy is that the whole ocean industry is what will together be able to lift the UN sustainability goals and actually achieve the changes that we need to perform to be able to achieve the 1.5 temperature reduction goal that we all actually have to individually think about also. For Nordshipping's part, we've set out to have a special focus on 4 of the UN sustainability goals. We have a special focus on UN sustainability goal number 5, and we define it as having an extra focus on diversity and on gender balance in everything we do. And we want our work going forward to be a platform for that. Next up, we have a special focus on sustainability goal number 13, which is climate, of course. Our next focus point is 14, which is life underwater, and the last is 17, which is partnership for the goals. And these 4 are special focus areas for us in the time to come, and we're going to develop projects that we hope will have an impact on how our conference in specific and our industries as well will be able to perform better and actually realize the goals of these specific ones. So I'm going to pass it over to Johan.
Thank you. So, out of curiosity, in this room, who does not own a car? That's amazing. See, I didn't even expect it to be that many. So I'm not going to talk about cars. I'm going to talk about the alternative to cars and the supplement to mass transit, which Frode is working on, and that is micromobility. How many here have heard the term micromobility before? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, some. That's good. So I come from Urban Sharing, Norwegian startup who work on shared micromobility, and I wanted to take you through 3 points. 1, to give you an idea of what it is for the other than the 5 that actually knows what it is. Why that is such a good fit for some of the urban challenges we're facing, and finally, why this is going to be huge. So first of all, one of the definitions for micromobility is the weight, because typically we talk about micromobility as something that's less than 500 kilos. And that's interesting in two ways. One is that, you know, it's small and it's not going to injure someone if you hit them with it. Well, it may, but not big time. But it's more important in terms of the energy that is consumed. Because you've probably all seen the figures for how much energy is used in a combustion engine on a car, and it really comes down to 1.75% of the energy is actually used to move you. The rest is used as, you know, heat loss or move a hunk of steel around. So that's insane that we're still doing that. The other part is if you look at the small vehicles, such as a little scooter or electric skateboard, these things, like they weigh about, 15 pounds, and almost 70% of the energy is used to move a human being. So in my mind, we should be moving towards where the energy is a lot more efficient. The other part is if you look at the footprint of these vehicles. So, I mean, these cars that typically transport one person take up a huge amount of space in the cities, whereas a lot of these micromobility concepts, scooters, cars, monovehicles, you've seen all these crazy things coming out now. They typically don't take up that much more space than a human in itself. And I'm not going to bring up the whole debate in Oslo in terms of parking spaces, but a car typically takes up the space of about 15 bikes, and 15 bikes typically take up the space of about 30 scooters. So you can add a lot more to the city with these small vehicles. So that's sort of the definition of micromobility. These small vehicles. But the interesting thing is that they have 3 superpowers that kind of supercharge the idea of them. The obvious one is that a lot of these are shared. So, one of the first things we built was the city bikes here in Oslo. And a bike in Oslo is used between 7 and 10 times per day. So you have a really efficient use of a vehicle. So that's one thing. The other is that more and more of these are electrical. So you add power to the human energy put into this vehicle. And the third one is that more and more of these are intelligent. It might either be on board on the vehicle, or it might be a central sort of brain that actually dictate where they should be in order to produce the maximum amount of trips. And these three things is kind of what's supercharging these vehicles in a sense that we haven't really seen before with traditional cars or public transport. So that's sort of like the idea of this new industry of micromobility. You've probably seen the dockless bike sharing in Asia, the scooter startups that every city have kids coming out of business school, and they all have a business case for that, get some investors and run out the scooters. They're not going to be here next year, some of them. But anyways, the reason why this is such a good fit right now is to drop a UN reference myself as well, is we are going to be about 2 to 3 billion more people in the cities in the next 30 years. So we're running out of space, like big time we're running out of space. Some cities already did, like cities like we love, like Paris, they're already gridlocked. I mean, they come to a standstill. And that's where it's interesting to look at these micromobility vehicles, because even the bus is slowed down by cars that is in a gridlock. But if you look at bikes and these other small vehicles, they're kind of keeping their speed through the city, and that is less pollution locally, but it actually keeps the speed up. And actually keeping the speed is important for many reasons, one of them being just an equity perspective, that people are able to live somewhere else because they are able to still get to that school or the workplace. But even more importantly, which I think more and more politicians is going to wake up to, is this actually affects our productivity. When people are stuck in cars, productivity in a city goes down. So if we are able to move more people, and actually that's an interesting figure as well, is if you look at the cars going through a 4-meter wide lane, you're able to get about 2,600 people an hour. If you look at something like bikes or scooters, you're able to get about 12,000 people through that same lane in the same hour. So it's a lot more efficient to move these people. So that's why the reason why this is such a good fit for the urban challenge we're facing in terms of running out of space. And finally, the reason why this is going to be huge is because the time to market here is incredibly short. To develop a car, it takes about 6 years, and then you have to have it in the market for almost 10 years to pay it back. To develop an e-bike is about 2 years, a regular bike about a year, and a scooter, it takes about 6 months to develop and get it to the market. So you get the product cycle that looks a lot more like the smartphones, and we saw, how that disrupted the computer industry. That's about to happen in transport because you have these incredibly fast feedback cycles of putting new products into the streets. And the other thing is they're quite cheap. Like for the scooters we buy, you can get them down to about $400 or $500 a piece. So that means you can make back the money for one of these devices in about 2 to 3 months. That means that this is going to grow at an exponential speed. And finally, the thing that we get when we query our users about why do you adopt these things and why do you use them, we see something else you will never see with public transport or other modes of transportation, is that people say it's fun. And that means you lower the threshold for trying that and actually using it. So it's going to grow exponentially. So that's micromobility.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm already learning a lot. Thank you so much. We'll get to your questions in just a moment, but I wanted to pick up quickly on equality and inclusion that you all touched on, whether it was someone being able to go to football practice or diversity being a goal, or you mentioned equity. There's already fears that technology that's being developed now is perpetuating the same systems and imbalances of power that exist. And actually, Johan, I watched a talk that you had given previously mentioning even Google Maps algorithms that give you and me different recommendations when we enter restaurants. And that's, again, just continuing the current imbalances that we have. So I'm curious how sort of in your work, we are ensuring that the future of cities are equitable and diverse and include everybody.
I can start out just adding a bit on that, because I think, and this is one of the reasons why I'm not going to be critical of VC investors, because I mean we need some of that money ourselves, but I think we as a society and cities need to be really critical right now on what really goes into how we use data, what we put into our algorithms, because a lot of these things will be put on the street just to capture every dollar from the lazy middle class kids out there. Which, my big fear is that we're going to have tons of scooters basically just attracting to Solieplass, because that's where the, willingness to pay is going to be. But that's really not the task at hand. What we should look at, and we did that study with the bikes, is who is really underserved right now. And what a lot of people don't realize, and then don't take this badly, because it is what it is. But we have a transportation system today that is really made to bring men downtown. That's really how it's set up. It doesn't really respect the fact that in female-dominated workplaces, it's irregular hours, and it's more of a horizontal, path through the city. And these things we didn't see when we didn't have the data. But once we have these vehicles where we actually see where they go and know who's riding them, you realize that there are holes and gaps in how the cities work. And I think a really important responsibility for a lot of these more dynamic vehicles, and then when we have that, possibility, we should think about not, producing the maximum amount of trips, but actually look at who's underserved in the community and use regulation. And I think that should be one of the reasons why private companies like us should be able to operate, is that we can prove that we don't have those biases, or that we are able to serve the underserved.
No, it's a very important topic, and as I mentioned, when we integrated our selected development goals, one of them were equality, the other one was economic growth, climate change and health. So we have 8, but those 4 are the ones we're trying to measure our effect on, and it's difficult, but we're trying to. And I think one of the benefits by being publicly owned and financed by the public, half of it, is that we have to balance this societal situation, which is one of 4 aspects, with the individual, we call it movement of freedom situation, right? Because when we started to learn about technology, we got really engaged, and we saw all these situations where we could have a driverless bus pick you up at your home and drive you to a place. And then actually we found the need to actually use sustainable development goals to find that balance. Because we have to balance the individual perfect freedom with the need for society, and that's when one of those, equality is one of the benefits. And I saw an interesting number some days ago. We saw who are driving public transportation. We saw normally, so if the income is here, normally you see that the people who's driving using public transportation is the poorest, and then if you get richer, you're driving car in most cities. And in Norway, you have this dip where you have the bit poorer and the richer take public transportation, because a lot of people from the outside are going into Oslo with well-paid jobs. So it isn't it's the men people probably mainly coming in, but the situation is that we have actually quite a high standard of equality in Norway in that sense, but at the other sense we have a big inequality with east and west of Oslo, which again we can at least reduce by having good cross-city solutions, having people being able to travel and working inside a city and living outside of it. So I think for us, since we're publicly owned, we are able to integrate that target, and we're able to put money behind something that's not just purely commercial. And also, if you're going to use with algorithms in our app or solutions that we work with, we can actually prioritize things that will reduce inequality. One very concrete example is that we have also now. Have anybody heard about the pink buses of Ruter? The 6 pink buses? Yeah. So with another pilot we have, where we have the older-friendly transportation. 6 pink buses in Nordre Aker, which are, it's a collaborative partnership with Oslo, where you saw that the elderly in one area, what is their biggest needs? They said, well, we have the need to move more freely around, and not just to sit in our home, but to be with other people in the elderly society. And they couldn't take the bus that run frequently. So we took 6 buses and we made a route so that the bus goes like this every second hour. And the elderly can call in and say, I want to take this bus. So then the bus will reroute and go to their house, pick them up, go to the next person's house, pick them up, and go to the elderly center and to the Storo center. And this has been a huge success, and now Oslo is considering rolling that out. So that extent, first of all, it is reducing inequality, because you take elderly more back into society and the way it should be. And if you think about the economic societal value of it, You'll reduce the extra cost of taxis, taking that person to different things, altså TT-kostnader. You will increase people being able to stay at home, and people who knows macroeconomy knows how much we pay because people are not staying at home, have to be treated at the hospital. So again, if you look at the whole perspective of societal value and benefits, that solution also for inequality is really, really good. If you ask Ruter 3 years ago, we said no way, because we pay 250 kroners per trip. I'm going to go bankrupt if we do that all the time. But if you look at bigger picture, it's a positive case.
Thank you both for sharing honest feedback on that. It's an important topic, and for me, the things that are happening in Oslo give me hope for future cities if we keep looking at situations in this way. So we'll open it up now for your questions. I only have this one wandering microphone, so we'll start with questions on this side of the room, and then we'll switch to over here. So raise your hand if you want to jump in. Or we can start here if you prefer. Yes, one in the back.
Yes, hello. I have a question for Frode. You talked about these pink buses, which is really interesting. And I was wondering, the ones that were in this pilot project, did they have to pay anything to take this bus? Or is that for free when it's a pilot?
The financing model is that we work with money from the Oslo city and also some add-ons for us. We chose the payment system that they paid average at Ruter ticket, a very standard Ruter ticket for each trip. So I think, and those are elderly, so it's what is a trip cost for elderly? Maybe 16, 17, 20 kroners per trip. So it's not free, but it has a cost.
So is that the intention if they're going to or have more of those types of solutions? Will it be the same business model for that?
It's a very good question. I don't think we have decided, and I don't think, and if we have, I don't know. But it's and it's very much about how, let's say, the politicians are viewing this. If they would find a way to calculate the effects and pay for that, it will be a different business model than if we have to look at it as a competitive thing that we do into increasing big buses in Oslo. So it really depends on many things, but yeah, not solved.
Okay, thank you.
Who's next?
So basically, both Frode and Johan, I was wondering, because it seems like there's a certain perfect match between your two companies. And I was wondering to Frode, are you going to be buying Johan's company or starting a competitor? And same for Johan, how do you see your company integrating with what Ruter is doing and its ambitions to deliver that entire mobility app? Because it seems like micromobility should be an integrated part of that experience. And I'm guessing you'll have a lot of maybe startups that would want to integrate with Ruter. And how are you handling sort of data sharing and creating a platform where that can happen?
That's a big question. I'm pretty sure we're not going to buy up that company. And as for all modern companies, as a business models is a variable. So it's basically going to differ both in times and what kind of area. But we have a very clear ambition that we want to, promote sharing. And we also have the very clear understanding that we have to integrate things and be part of that integration. And we already have a platform called the Ruter app, which we have to consider. And this, we also have a platform that has a lot of data. So we are an actor with a role in this ecosystem. And we don't want to spoil bad solutions. But there are a lot of, let's say, discussions and political, economic that have to be taken. I'm currently in a new kind of big strategy process where we're trying to clarify part of those questions and to be clear about what we do, what we don't want. But right now we're trying to be part of the ecosystem, trying to be positive and promote things, but at the same time are eager to state that, you know, we're there to try to ensure that we have a societal effect on what we do, a good future city, and make decision based on that. We're actually trying to evaluate things based on our sustainable development goals. But we're integrating that right now, and we are having a pilot together, which is a perfect way, because in that pilot we will learn about the effects on the whole microtransit and your solutions, and based on that learning we'll make bigger decisions.
You just think my exit strategy was blown from stage here, but no, it's. I think one of the reasons why it's important for us that actually Ruter is, or any public company really, is the owner of data is. I mean, the alternative is that Google or Uber owns it, and then no one accesses it, and we can't reach any of our political goals with how we want to run transport. So I think Ruter and NSB and the likes has a really important role to be that aggregator that actually owns the data, and that's why we put all our data into the public domain so they can actually use it. But that being said, I think, you know, we're still not seeing. We had that first wave in Norway where people started to share data, but I'm kind of disappointed, and that doesn't necessarily go to Ruter, but in general that I haven't really seen that being utilized or integrated, and I think that also comes down to how, you know, these companies are organized. That, I mean, luckily we have people like Frode and others in the Ruter who wants to do something about it, but I still don't think there are enough incentivized to actually make them use it. Like I think it should be, you know, highly incentivized to do that kind of integrations. But that being said, I mean, the pilot Frode was mentioning is that's how we try to run, is when we now roll out scooters, we invite Ruter to take part of that pilot, and then we basically share the data so that we tell them where every single scooter went, so that we actually can understand together what is the role of the scooter and what is the role of the bus, and who actually jumped off that bus and onto a scooter to make the whole transportation system look better. But again, this is something we just do because we believe in it. There are no models and incentives to do it. Actually, it's hard for us to do it, because if we don't put it into public domain, like, we will touch into all these kind of rules around tenders and stuff, that kind of stuff. So it's actually hard to do this kind of collaboration, which is kind of sad. So what I would like to see is that we had, from a political point, it should be easier for companies to us to do these initial pilots, and then of course the tenders and all of that should be highly regulated, but it should be a lot easier to do these first pilots. Do you have any experience with that from your time in the smart city?
A bit, which is funny now, because I'm feeling almost a bit left out of the conversation, which is ironic because I work in the maritime industry, and I think the shipping industry probably feels a bit left out of this whole sustainable discussion at times. So it's actually quite in its place, perhaps. But yeah, I do have some experience in the field of public procurement and innovative public procurement. In my time in Oslo Business Region, I did work with an accelerator program for smart city technologies, attracting startups into solving problems within the smart city for the municipality of Oslo. And that's not an easy exercise. And it's definitely worth the lesson that the public sector can utilize their funds, and they can utilize their procurement muscle especially much better to serve the startup community and to help develop young technologies that are necessary to, for example, encourage more people to get into public transport, to make it easier to use shared services. And I guess that Oslo Bysykkel and Urban Infrastructure Partner is quite a good example of that. When we did the accelerator program, what we saw was that the competency within procurement, within the municipality at least, which is my experience from the public sector, was quite limited when it came to what kind of solutions you could actually choose from in your own backyard, so to speak. So one of the most important things we did see was that having programs that would connect the municipality to the startup community would be a dual kind of program, where we saw that the municipality would actually increase their competencies significantly by being in touch with accelerator programs, being in touch with incubators, getting in touch with the local tech community. And And I think this is a really good lesson for anyone working within public or in the intersection with public-private, that we should encourage more public-private partnerships and more public-private sharing of data, of course, because it makes it possible for every part to increase their competencies.
Thanks.
Yes.
Who's next?
I have a quite general question regarding your opinion on the role of taxis and like, let's say like shared economy taxis, but also, I don't know, automated cabs in the future of the cities. Because for me, it feels that it might be quite a space-efficient way to just focus mobility in the city on the automated taxi. And I don't know if it is like shared economy model or state-owned or whatever. And also quite possibly maybe more convenient than micromobility. I'm not sure here.
Well, if it's a bit, I think it's a difference if you talk about taxis and if you think about other kind of shared solutions, because I think, you know, the business model or the concept of taxis are also changing, and I guess it is a bit under attack. And there's some good things about the current taxis, and they have some challenges. So where the current system of taxis is gonna be in the future, I don't know. But as I mentioned, I think, you know, things should be integrated, and you should have solutions that is adjusted to your needs at the current situation. And if you think about that, you actually will have room for all devices. There are sometimes that you have to take a metro to try to, you know, to get hundreds of people from the areas where they travel. There are sometimes where there's, you know, a big bus like we have today is really extremely right to go a bit further out. And there's some ways that microtransit is very good to have a small Segway to take you the last kilometer, because that's why you don't want to have a car, you take the bus and the micro. But it's definitely also a need for a vehicle with 2, 5, 6, 7, 10 places. So my belief is that these smaller vehicles than the big buses will have an increase when you are able to utilize them. You have to, the big buses to be, you know, the big buses is actually a concept where 50 people get into a big bus and you share the cost of the driver, which is more than half the cost of the bus trip. So when you go to that situation, you actually get driverless situation, that concept is dead. And the vehicle price, if it's driverless, electric, and utilized a lot more, will be a different economic ballgame. So you actually don't have the necessity to have those big buses and can use smaller devices. And you also are some companies working on devices where you connect those small devices, where you have 5 devices connect together, take you from Oslo to Skøyen, and then maybe one device goes out to Fornebu, 4 others go to Asker. That's even piloted. So if you really think about the future in 10, 15 years, I think the very different sizes and more flexible solutions are definitely part of the system.
I think you make a really good point about convenience, because that's the big challenge here, is that unfortunately in Norway people prefer convenience, obviously, and a lot of us have the money to pay for it. And that's going to make it actually hard to change a lot of the behavior we need to change. And I think to your point about ride sharing, which I think is really funny, like how somehow magically this just become hailing services, because people started to realize that people are not sharing at all. It's just 1 or 2 people in these cars. And if you look at places, especially like Manhattan and a lot of other cities, these kind of ride-sharing services, or now hailing services, basically pulled people out of public transport and into these cars. So it actually ruined something that was good and made it worse. And the same thing for a lot of the studies for automated or autonomous cars. It will increase congestion and space in the city before it actually gets better. And still, I still find autonomous technology highly overrated. I think we're kind of in love with that technology because we understand it, it looks cool, but it's not solving the problem. Like, we should start out filling the empty seats in the existing technology we have. That's where efficiency is. But we have all these journalists and politicians who think it's fun to be seen in this small bus moving at 5 kilometers an hour.
Yeah, and now we're actually going right into the technology trap, because you know, this is, now we're focusing a lot on mobility here. I think I may have come to the wrong discussion. No, I'm just kidding. The thing is that, you know, not everyone should have to be on some sort of transportation at any time. And this has something to do with city development and how we develop our regions. And this is something to do with regional development. And this has something to do with how we develop our boroughs. I mean, city planning is actually quite essential in all of this, and sensible city planning, so that in the borough that I live in, it should be a planning of that borough so that I won't have to deal with taking my car or my public transport to the other side of town to be able to serve my basic needs, such as basic medical, basic food groceries, right? So this is one part of the discussion, which is perhaps for us who live here in Oslo, and we're really lucky to be living in Norway, is quite given. But for large parts of the rest of the world, when we are having this discussion, for them it's a little bit utopian, right? Yeah.
Just want to add to that, because it's a very important fact that we should applaud our politicians, I think, for. Because 6 years ago, when we made some strategies at Ruter, we were really aiming to drive politicians and others to think about how to, you know, develop a city that is sustainable, which means also that people live more in dense places, live together. But now you have this plansamarbeidet, and you have plans where all the municipalities, you decided that you have Oslo. In Akershus you have 6 cities, you know, Ås, Ski, Drammen, Asker, which are going to be Lillestrøm, which are going to be built out. You have the percentage, how much of the growth will be happening there. And when we have those plans, and the municipality have been part of developing those plans, it's easier for us to, you know, plan a metro or bus lines according to those plans. So it's compared with others, it's an extremely well played together, organized system of where people stay, where people live, how people live, and the mobility space. I just want to have one aspect also to the point of the smaller vehicles. There's a study done in Lisboa for you know, what can be done with when things are getting driverless, and then the big idea is to think about sharing out your things. There is sharing of a car and sharing of a journey. So driverless will just, you know, then the sharing of a car will take off, because the cars can be shared, but if you still drive the car yourself, not at all, that doesn't solve a lot of the issues. But if you talk about sharing of trips, that's when you get a lot of good societal effects. And it's important to differentiate those two discussions of sharing. Sharing is not sharing, it's different kind of sharing. But my concept was, in that study of Lisboa, which was very interested, you saw that, and there's done now 5 studies of cities, you see that to enable this future mobility of all driverless good mobility solution that just, you know, solves your issue, you can have a very high degree of success when you have a high degree of public transportation at the bottom, at the as a basis. So if you have the public transportation as a basis, and then you make a supplement with the smart things, that will solve the issues of the city. If you have very weak public transportations, and you start using all those sharing solutions, which will be fragmented, it actually has a quite, at least not as positive, and sometimes negative societal effects. So again, you know, applause for the politicians that have spent a lot of money on Ruter and public transportation, so we have the basis, so to be able to leverage new things and hopefully make it better for all, not very fragmented and expensive at the end, if we do it right.
I can give you the microphone for 15 seconds or less. It's 7 o'clock.
Cool. I have 10 more. Okay, I just moved to Oslo from less developed town as Oslo is, and jeg snakker ikke norsk ennå. But give me, let's say, 18 months, I hope to speak fluent Norwegian. But Silje, information for you. No, information. Ruter has boats. So probably some of your experiences in maritime industry might be used by Ruter because, as I know, some islands are connected to the main city with the boats. So probably your experiences might be used by Ruter as well. So we don't feel that, you know, detached from the
No, this is true.
This is
And also,
one.
yeah, we're
This
very
is one-
excited about a few boats that we know are coming when in August, September.
Electric?
Yes.
Yeah, but
we're very
my
excited
question,
about that.
I have a question to Frode. Sorry, but you're, you know,
No problem.
the Red Sparrow today. The ideas are fantastic, really. I'm so impressed. Of course, I still don't know how you plan to reduce subsidizing the tickets, reducing or the cost of the mass transportation, reducing the number of people that will use mass transportation walking. Because this is what you said, that this is what you want to do. This is one thing. But the second thing, and the crucial, is Norway is a member state and the party of International Convention on Traffic, Vienna 1968. And this international convention that Norway is a party of says that in each and every country that is a party of this convention, the driver always has to have a possibility to stop the car that is driving. And autonomous cars are fantastic on the stage of pilot program, because these are the surveys. But you are not allowed to implement it until the international law, of which is more than 100 countries, member states, will be changed. And how you said that you are full of applause to politicians, but now there is a job for them to do.
I didn't get the first question about the second one. Okay. So if I understood the second question, it was if we think the politicians will enable some laws that we can actually enable driverless cars to become a reality. I think, you know, driverless, for me, driverless is like in this part of the S-curve. So I think it's a bit hyped right now. It's going to take a few more years before it goes really fast. And then when it comes, it's going to be really, really fast, I think, in one way. The second is, I think, you know, it's not going to be like now we drive the car and it's going to be driverless. You know, there are 5 maturity steps within that. So, you know, starting that you can use driverless system to park your electric bus under the loading station to avoid chaos. When it comes to driverless, you're going to be able to see that you can drive driverless in the E18, but when you go outside, you have to take over. So it will take quite a bit of time, and we are depending on 5G and different things to really have a complete driverless system for all purposes. If it's 10 or 15 or 20 years, I don't know. So my belief, given the political situation right now, is that, you know, the legal side, I think, will be ready if the technology proves itself ready. And then it's the system change to make, again, how do we adjust to all these devices coming together? Can it be done now? Have to be controlled? The system change. What about the data security, the hacking issue, the 5G that needs to be required to get all the data fast enough? So you have all those elements together that have to come into play to really make it happen. And I think, again, that the legal system, although being a bit late the last 3-4 years, will not be the issue when it gets there, because there's so much studies now happening, and there's so much eagerness. Also in the EU, I've been there in some innovation workshops, and there are a lot more listening to companies and others to this, and they're eager to adjust and learn. Also in Norway, you know, the Minister of Transport has been really progressing to make the trials happening, and I think also eager to see the laws are changing with the technology advancement as well. So it's a complex question, but I'm an optimist.
I have to apologize to this side of the room. I lied. I don't have time to ask you for your questions. There's obviously so much more that can be said about this topic. The trade-off between usefulness and privacy is something that I think each of you could speak to. again, just the conversation could continue. So the bar up here will be open for at least another hour. So please stay and ask your questions. Hopefully the three of you can stay with us for a little while. The bar downstairs is open till 11. So I encourage you all to hang out. And then we'll see you back here on February 21st. Our next conversation is about business's responsibility towards the environment. So maybe we'll have Silje speak more about oceans then. So a big round of applause for our speakers. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and being here.